Welcome back. This afternoon we have several live discussions. We'll find out who our pitch winners are, and sadly at some point we're going to have to say goodbye, but we have plenty for you before then. First, we'll be hearing about success and frustration when it comes to personalized medicine, cell and gene therapy trends. So please welcome for our next roundtable, the moderator, who is the founder and CEO of BioUp, Elsie Boglioli-Hoffman. And her panelists, the CEO of Laverock Therapeutics, David Venables, the CEO of TreeFrog, Frédéric Deduy, the principal of Roland Berger and more, and the CEO of Kiji Therapeutics, Miguel Fort.
Are we all good? So hello everyone, very happy to be here to talk about cell and gene therapy and the great successes and frustrations in this field. So maybe before we get started, I'd like to share a short personal story. I jumped into the cell and gene therapy field back in 2017. I joined a company called Selectus, and back in the days we had just cured a young girl in the UK who basically had no treatment options. And it was the time of the great promises of allogeneic CAR T therapies. Promises which mainly still have to materialize, but we can talk about that. And a few months later, I had a friend in private equity who called me up because he was considering doing an angel investment in a cell and gene therapy company. And he asked me a lot of questions, he did his due diligence, and he called me back a month later and said, "Why are you doing that? God, it's so complicated and the chances of success are so low. It's a crazy field." And so I guess we all kind of feel this way, but the promise and the cures that we can bring are pretty amazing. And I think that's a passion that we all share in this panel. So with that introduction, I'd actually like each panelist to introduce himself, maybe say a few words about yourself, and maybe share an element, an anecdote, something salient about your passion for cell and gene therapy. Miguel?
Thanks, Elsie. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Miguel Fort, CEO of Kiji Therapeutics. And is it much better this way? And in addition to that, I'm also president of the International Society of Cell and Gene Therapy and member of the board of Alliance for Regenerative Medicine. I've been involved in cell and gene therapy now for nearly 15 years. Started when I moved from biologics, everything, the challenge that they had and who were achieving success, onto a small company in the south of France, which really excited me with the promise, the scientific promise, but value that it could bring to patients. At the time, I disdained MSCs as I was working with a Treg. It's interesting that my current technology uses MSCs to improve Treg function. So life goes back and forth. But in the end, what we do with passion and bring value to patients. I think we're going to talk about the challenges we're facing, so I'll leave comments about that when we come to it.
Thank you.
Hi everyone, so I'm Anne. I'm actually extremely honored to be here because everyone who's doing the heavy lifting are around me, but me. I'm representing a consulting firm, so I'm actually helping people raise funds and I'm helping them better understand the field and everything. And I think the reason why I was extremely interested with the CAR T and cell therapy and everything was that I fell into the big show de rôle. as we say, like about 6 years ago when it was really all of a fame, it was a hot topic. Everyone with a CAR T somewhere in the title was actually raising money. And I was a banker at that time, so it was an easy work for me, actually. I quickly jumped to Celyad, which was a big company at the time doing CAR T with a very innovative approach. So that's where I was really confronted with the patient and what was the expectation. And basically when I was on that company, what you realize that once you see the little tag saying CAR T, you kind of pull on it, and then there is a huge things coming behind it, talking about the population of the cells. Are we really injecting what we think we are injecting to the patient, which I think is a fair question, and also how long is that wave of financing still going on? So I think my view on that panel is more on the side, making you guys again doing all the heavy lifting and helping to try and have investor understanding where we stand today. Because again, 6 years ago that was whole of a hot topic. And nowadays, when we're talking about cell therapy, when I'm talking with PE investors and everything, I feel like people are kind of more on the backside and waiting to be really convinced. That's interesting.
Thank you. David?
Hi, so Dave Venables, I'm CEO of Lavrock Therapeutics. So my history with the cell and gene therapy space actually goes back to the mid-90s. So that says something about the way I selected my career choices. I started off first of all, in my career, focused on monoclonal antibodies when producing monoclonal antibodies was really difficult. I went into vaccines when it used to take decades to get vaccines approved, and look how that's changed now. And then in sort of the mid to late 90s, fascinated by viruses and what we could do with viruses, not just as vaccines, but as gene therapy focus. I got very excited, moved into gene therapy at that stage when it was on the up. Then it became tough, and then it came back and went up again, and now it's tough again. So sort of seen it through many cycles. So I guess you can tell I'm attracted by challenges, and when things get tough, then I get excited. But just by way of an anecdote, just to show something of the way this whole industry has changed. So my eldest daughter was born in 1997. So in those days, we were really in the research labs, very first thinking about CAR T therapies and novel approaches around cancer. And now she is as a trained pediatrician, is on the wards treating kids who have received CAR T therapies. And I think for me, that just brings home to me what we have seen that's so exciting just over the past couple of decades in the transformation of medicine, the tools that we have available, the approaches that we take, and the cures that we can see. And that's why, even though it is tough and it is challenging, it stays a passion and a commitment and something I'm still dedicated to pursue and enjoy pursuing.
Thanks, David.
Thanks, David. So I'm Frédéric Delouis. I'm the CEO of Tree Frog, and it's good to feel young because I'm the new kid on the block here. I joined the field only 5 years ago as a board member of Tree Frog, and then as a CEO. And I'm one of the luckiest CEO in this industry because my founders very early on identified that they would need help to, let's say, to fulfill the promise of what we are developing. And they asked me to get on board and to take the position as CEO. And we moved the company. 5 years ago we were less than 20 people to 170 people now. With labs both in Pessac, in Bordeaux, and in Boston, and it's an incredible journey. We will discuss that, I guess, but we just signed a very let's say structuring deal for us with Vertex on type 1 diabetes, and I think the patient we're talking about is also the fact that it's working. When you see what's happening in patients. 3 years ago when we raised our Series B, the question of the investors was, well, do you know if iPSCs-based therapies will work in humans? At that time, we had very little data. Today, we have a bunch of data. It's not yet a wave of data, but a bunch of data showing the safety and the efficacy of those products. So, yeah, it's coming. Yeah, it's hard time, as David just said. The financing world is tough, but clearly, things are moving. So very excited to be here and very excited to share, those only 5 years of experience.
Thanks, Frédéric. Anne, I think maybe you looked at a few numbers and trends, and I know you wanted to share with us some thoughts and positive thoughts actually on the increase of approvals and drugs. So if you have a bit of insight to get us started, that would be great.
So that's always an interesting question, because when we're talking about cell therapy and we are talking about gene therapy, if you look at the market data from like 10 years ago and what we have today, we're like, yeah, there seems to be some sort of pushback of the number. And I think this is quite interesting to also have a look. But now, when we look at all those data and how people are forecasting that field, I think that there is some reasoning that has been put into those forecasts and trying to make sure we really understand what we're talking about. We are coming from very far away, and I think maybe 6 to 7 years ago, having the first CAR T delivered into patient and showing really good positive result was one success, and now we have like 36,000 gene therapy that are on the market already. So we are coming from very far away and very quickly. What we've seen also very interestingly on the cell and gene therapy, and I know that the field is quite hard in terms of financing, but again, we are still on a double-digit, very high projection of the market, and people are still believing in that. And I think that's also part, maybe we're going to touch a little bit upon that, but why we are able to see that we're going to see like more than 20% growth of the market is also because we've been able to tackle a lot of challenges on how to produce that, do we have CDMOs that know how to manufacture our things, how to deliver to the patient, how to price those therapies, which you're going to talk way better than me about. But all those challenges now are behind us. So I do believe that the forecasts that we are delivering nowadays are really good, and we're on a very good trending. And that's the same for, we were discussing about the investment. Again, you will have your own vision of that. But what was interesting as well to see, so of course, we had the COVID effect, because people have the tendency to put mRNA into the cell and gene therapy field because we are touching basically RNA, but that's the way it is. But I feel like we're going back into what was the pre-COVID numbers, and we do see that, and the value of the investment and the M&A that I've been doing over the field is actually back to the pre-COVID and is still strong and going strong. So that's quite an interesting time, I swear.
Miguel, you're also the president of the International Society of Cell and Gene Therapy, so I think you have a broad view on the field, and I know that you also have some interesting analysis on how the financing and commercialization fields are evolving. I'd love to hear about that from you, because I think things are progressing, but it's not rosy. There are some threats, and it's important that we're all aware of these.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, the field is fantastic. What we have done, I was an HIV physician, and we had the virus that we controlled as a pathogenic agent, and now we use it, or cousins of it, to actually harness therapeutic value. So the scientific promise and the value to patients is phenomenal. Nevertheless, I think we are at a very important transition moment. If we go back, we saw the initial science leading into products, regulatory discussions becoming more solid, regulators reducing the risk aversion because they knew more and engaged more, and that translates to a series of approvals. That is maturity of the system and the field. We scientists, clinicians, regulators, grew with the field and became adapted to the innovation and new technologies. We now need to bring also, I'll do like Frederick, he actually put it against the chin, so I'll do the same thing. We have to carry everybody else as well. I mean, we need to make sure that we have conditions to administer these products. We have the trained staff that is able to do that. And we also have to evolve the payers with us into new models. And along all of that, the investors that enable us to do all of this. So we have a huge promise, solidified with approvals, that needs to be deployed to patients. I think we need to see more adoption. At ISCT, when I applied to president and then got elected, my mission is global presence for local impact to enable access. And we're seeing a series of new models of access globally, and we had some discussions about those approaches earlier on in the morning. So we are all together having the scientific fun, bringing value, carrying the field with us, but there's some that still need to be carried, and I'll highlight the payers and the investors as the ones that really need to help us the next step.
Thanks. I think investors are a key topic. Frédéric, David, I know you both have stories with investors and also BD discussions. I'd love to hear one of you on this topic.
Yeah, happy to go. So, I mean, this whole journey of cell and gene therapy, I think, is fascinating, and it's multi-component. But at the end of the day, we shouldn't lose sight of the fact that there's patient pull, and there's parent pull to get therapies developed to their kids, to the adults, to actually change the nature of disease, and that's not going to go away. And that pull is consistently going to be there, and is a mission we're called to address, and we will continue to focus on that. But I guess the journey I see over all of my time involved in it is a bit like, you know the destination you want to get to, but you have to sort of excavate the ground, lay the train track, and build the train all at the same time, and try and do that. And we have seen successes. We have seen products get to the market. Those train tracks are being laid down. The groundwork is being done. The regulations are adapting. Access and getting access to patients for approved products is still challenging. But those are good conversations and discussions to be able to have, because that shows that the products are getting there. And so we are having success. But the fuel in the train, if you like, continues to be the finance, and that is challenging. So investors, for many reasons that have been discussed yesterday and today, investors are sitting on their hands. They are nervous. They are watching carefully. And in the meantime, the science is progressing. The innovation is there. The new technologies are coming out, and the investment is required to fuel that and help get the train down the track. I mean, there's different phases of investment. What we're seeing, and I guess I'm seeing it particularly from a UK perspective, is there's a lot of seed money available. There's a lot to get a company started, and get that initial seed investment is not the most challenging step. So for us as a company, we raised 13.5 million pounds GBP last year. We were the second largest seed round for a startup company in the UK last year. So we were able to get the company formed and established and generate that data. I'm working with other companies that are trying to go into their next clinical trial. That's challenging, because investors like novelty. They like the idea of seeding science and seeing some innovation. But then when it gets to the later stages, it's about, well, what's your efficacy? What data have you got to show that my bet on your clinical trial is likely to pay out favorably? So that's challenging. And then on the further end, at the sort of the phase 3 and beyond, then there is some activity at a discount price of pharma coming in, looking to fill their pipeline and take products on. So I wouldn't say that it's just one story about good or bad investment environment. There are highlights. There's sort of good spots, and there's areas of challenging. But as you said, the volume of investment going in now is pretty much equivalent to pre-COVID. So we're back. I mean, this is normal. It's challenging because there's a lot more companies out there fighting for the money, but it is, in that sense, relatively normal. But it's being placed very selectively, I think, within particular teams, particular companies, and also companies at particular stages in their development cycle.
It's true. I don't want to make things more complex, but when we're dealing with cell therapy, there are like two dimensions to it. The autologous, the allogeneic market, and there is the immuno-oncology market, and the rest. And those are very different markets. And it's very difficult to give, as you try to, but it's very difficult to give an overview of what's happening. And it's a story of woods and trees. For the last 3 years, people have been investing a lot on immuno-oncology, really a lot. And while we know the results are maybe not exactly where we were expecting them to be, but in parallel with this investment in immuno-oncology, some others invested in other areas, in solid organs, brain, heart, pancreas, liver, you name it. And there, a lot of progresses have been made. And it's because we are making this, not Trifor, but as a group, we are creating this market. We need to educate also investors on what's happening. Because they look at the numbers, cell and gene therapy, but when you dig into specifics, then it gets very hard for them to spend the time to understand exactly what's happening. And again, today we have programs in the clinics based on stem cells in neuro and in Parkinson's disease, in epilepsy, in cardio, in myocardial infarction, in pancreatic diseases, obviously, type 1 diabetes. It's moving up in liver diseases. So clearly there are a lot of information in the marketplace that are not so well known even by investors. So, and it's our job also to explain this market and to explain how things are going and the progress of science in those directions.
If I can maybe just jump on that just for a second, that's very true what you're saying, is that, so like 6-7 years ago, we were saying investor making huge investment and really flooding the market easily when you had those buzzwords and then the money was flowing. And then at one point, everyone was just like, well, there was one success. Where are the others? So they kind of went on the back and expecting. So nowadays, I feel like our job also is every day we are trying to make sure investors understand what that means to be a cell therapy, where we are coming from, and where we are going. Because as you're saying, one product, because you're under cell therapy, one product is not the same one as the other. So it's also extremely complex as a science, and making sure everyone understands the science and then put that on the back and focus on the company and the mission and where they want to go is extremely important. And again, if we think about gene therapy, a while ago, gene therapy was about having, muscular dystrophy being cured and all the related kind of diseases. Now, where does gene therapy came into play and blossomed? Everything very localized. So we also, as you said, we are building the tracks, but there are patients on the train already. So it's also a question of making sure we have those patients going to the railway station and making sure they get the right treatment. It worked when we're going for local, we are proving success. But as you say, it's extremely different to try and have a gene therapy localized or having something for the whole body of a kid who is actually unable to walk. And that is where it's getting so hard for an investor, to be honest.
Yeah. If you allow me, I'll give you one specific example. I've actually written an editorial about it. Look about autoimmunity. CAR-T make fantastic success, and we know that about all the patients in terms of the hematological malignancies. Still has some challenges on solid cancers, but then jumped over to autoimmunity. That, for me, shows a maturity, a scientific and clinical maturity of the field, being able to explore new frontiers. The initial transition led to a lot of hype on investment. Nevertheless, that investment has been kind of trickling down. Kyverna and Cabaletta stock has been coming down. There may be other things to it, but it's been coming down, with a downward blip on expected safety reporting. So we need to understand the expectations and manage them, because fantastic science, then everybody is packing the next miracle and the next miracle. We're doing small miracles, but we're not doing fantastic, enormous miracles, because this is reality. We need to develop it adequately. We need to generate the data. And these expectations need to be managed, because the incremental value sometimes jumps that we're doing, can really need to be interpreted on its own each time. So to the point that everybody said, managing the expectations of the market, of the investors, of the clinicians in terms of the progression we make, that may not be the progression they expect, and that's what we need to deal with.
I think that's a very good point. And, we've seen it, for example, at Lavrock with David, where we're getting a lot of questions on autoimmune. And it feels like because maybe this field is a little bit more nascent than others, and as you were saying, Frédéric, it's difficult to understand it. fashions and hypes go up and down very quickly, and that doesn't help the industry as a whole because it creates big shocks, it creates funding, roller coasters, and it's never good to be in a roller coaster if you're not a 5-year-old kid, so pretty challenging indeed.
Yeah, and I think we've seen that from the previous funding cycles where a lot of naive money has flooded in on the back. I mean, people used to think that AAV gene therapy, all the problems had been fixed 5 years ago. It was, we just need to raise money, select a target, get a capsid, put a gene in it, deliver it, and yeah, hey, away we go, we're going to make lots of money. And there was a lot of investors that came in on that basis. And they used to phone me up and sort of almost try and pitch me their next get-rich-quick play, a lot around contract manufacturing as well. The thought that, we'll get some money together, we'll put up some clean rooms, we'll sell ourselves as a contract manufacturer, we'll sell the business in 5 years and we'll make money. And these were conversations, people were coming to me with these as business propositions, and I think we owe it to, as CEOs, we have accountability here as well, I think, and being honest about where the science is at, where the data is at. Yes, we're selling a vision and we're selling the dream, but it has to be really rooted in fact and where the industry is today, where the science takes us. So we have to build that credibility and make sure that we're attracting the investors who are in it to actually invest for the long term and really support the industry through more growing pains, but put sensible, wise money into these businesses, not another get-rich-quick scheme that a lot of them come to us with.
So on that note, I think some people who have smart money are obviously pharma companies who are in the field. And I think, for cell and gene therapy companies, it may be even more important than for others to partner and to have the right partners. And this can bring a lot to a company. Frédéric, I think you know where I'm heading with this. Do you want to talk about our wonderful Vertex deal?
But it's an interesting, interesting line because when we started to think about the strategy of deploying our technology, okay, the base or the creation of TreeFrog is around the technology to manufacture human cells at scale with high quality. Okay, so over the last years, we developed the tools to bring that to GMP and to bring that to some use cases where we can show the power of the technology. Okay. Usual biotech spiel. But maybe 4 years ago, when we worked on the strategy, it was obvious that we were bringing something new to the field, a new way of manufacturing cells. So it was disruptive. And when you bring disruption in a nascent market, you can look at the strategic books. It means that you need to enter through the newcomers. You need to get adoption from newcomers that are willing with you to disrupt the market. If you go and see the leaders, most of the time they don't want to be disrupted. They have their own ways to make products, and they don't want to change that because they're on a track. They're on a track to phase 1, phase 2, whatever. So that was the analysis we made, 4 years ago. And then suddenly, at the end of 21, beginning of 22, we realized that money was not that easy to get for our partners, small biotech companies all over the world. And we realized that the pipeline of leads was declining. And we said, well, we need to change something. We need to change our approach. And we said, well, what can we do? And the only way that we found was to be bold and to go and see the big guys, so the Vertex of this world, and tell them, guys, if you really want to be successful, you need our technology. That's it. And so some did listen to it, some didn't, but some did. And it was interesting because when we negotiate, so I'm going to make it short, but when we negotiated with Vertex, clearly what was on the table was, how can we make you, they were asking us, how can we make you successful as a biotech company? So really in the sense of, as a big brother, how can we help you be successful? And at the same time, we were trying to figure out, being a small biotech in Pessac, how can we have an impact on Vertex? And that's how we manage that. But it's disrupting. Even Vertex being the leader in type 1 diabetes in cell therapy, bringing our technology into their product it's going to be disrupting for them. So I think that's where process being the product in our field, it's difficult to change the habits. It's difficult to make our partners, let's say, change angle and look at things differently. So and that's what we're trying to do. So yeah, Vertex was interesting in that sense that they came to us saying, how can we help you being successful? And that's how we started the discussion.
And I think it's very encouraging to see that large companies are really betting heavily on this field and with encouraging data. While we talked about challenging, let's stay on this encouraging note for a minute. I think from a regulatory perspective, the field has been very challenging, but there is also willingness from the agencies to understand, to adapt, to evolve. Miguel, I think you have a lot of agency interactions. Maybe you can tell us about how you see this evolving and maybe being better adapted to these therapies.
Sure. Just one quick loop. You're absolutely right, Frederick. I mean, it's our role to find whichever way we can to fund our companies, right? And BD is a significant alternative. Now, I actually think that regulatory, I'm quite comfortable and happy on the evolution of that. And I know from inside, I was a member of the European Agency for a period, so I know how challenging it is to make regulators move. But they have moved, right? If you go back to the beginning of the discussions and the discussions we're having today, and we see FDA, Peter Marks and Nicole, kind of engaging directly, having focused approach, having a platform approach, so to say, if you've done or someone else done that already, maybe we can streamline that. In other words, the risk aversion is coming down from the regulators. In Europe, we have a complex environment, which I think it is good, but comes with challenges. And we have a new impending legislation with the new commission and the parliament. And that is focusing a lot on biotech and pharma in general, and we have a proeminent, I say we, I mean cell and gene therapy, we have a proeminent position there, trying to evolve and get an evolution to bring us into the mainstream of the discussions. So I see it quite positive, and I think we should take that to make sure that the other stakeholders that need that evolution learn from the regulators that evolved and are now ready to have the right discussions. So should the others. So I'm quite comfortable with the regulators. They do their job well, but they collaborate a lot and more in cell and gene therapy. They get excited with the value to patients, and they get excited with the scientific discussions. They get excited at giving us a hard time, and we get excited and fighting back.
Yeah, I just agree with that. I think you're right. There's a lot of positivity around the regulatory environment and their willingness to, I mean, they see the patient need. They're under pressure to get novel technology out to kids, parents, whoever. And so in Lavrock's evolution, we're still very early. We're still at product concept stage, but we've already had our first meeting with the regulatory authorities to talk through the science and the technology that's coming and what sort of things we need to prepare for to address the concerns or the questions they'll have further down the line. So, I mean, it'd be unthinkable a few years ago to have these sorts of conversations at such an early stage, but for us, hugely valuable. Being able to tell our investors, yeah, we have met with the regulators, because they're always saying, have you met with the regulators, even though they don't really know what that means. Mostly they just want to tick a box. So yeah, we've met with the regulators. We got minutes of a meeting and we had a very good discussion. Thank you very much. So move on to your next due diligence question. So the regulatory environment is superb, I would say.
Yeah, and I think they're seeking education also. I mean, we see it in the relationships with the FDA. You know, everyone tells you, you will never get a meeting these days with the FDA. You send your briefing book, they send you answers. Well, sometimes we do get meetings, and the interaction's interesting.
Interesting, and also, to go down the line, Miguel, was, drafting is. We've seen, for instance, in our case, what we are manufacturing are micro tissues, so 3D objects, and regulators first meeting with the regulators, they said, well, we want single cell analyses, we want to understand cell by cell what you have in those microtissues, but it's impossible because when you start to dismantle those microtissues, basically you kill the cells. So the ones that survive are not the one, well, basically they're not representative of what you have. So we had to explain that, we had to show some data, they understood, and they said, so what do you propose? And we proposed another way of looking at this object, which is now accepted by FDA and AMA, but it's new. So it will open a new, I guess, avenue of describing a biological object. But yeah, and I think as you said, Elsie, they wanted to have meetings because they wanted to see us. They really wanted to discuss, and they really wanted to understand how we were approaching the science around those 3D living objects, and we learn a lot, and they learn a lot. So we are building the bridge together, and it takes time, and it's a bit sometimes a bit let's say scary for the teams. You never know. FDA is FDA, so we always very cautious, but it's very, very, very interesting.
Thanks, Frédéric. Hey, I forgot to mention in the beginning, but we are very happy to make this interactive. So we have roughly 5 minutes left. If there are any questions, we're more than happy to take them. And otherwise, we have a few other themes, but I already see a hand raised. So let's move to questions.
Okay, I needed to get my steps in today.
Fascinating presentation, thank you. 2 questions just on the topic you were talking about. One is on regulators and the expectation for safety. What can you say about what type of safety and what time horizon they expect for safety in such a field, which is totally unknown? And the second question, slightly different. When you speak of regulators, do you also speak about payers and bodies like NICE who will have a say on paying? Because, the regulatory hurdle is only the first step. If you don't get the access, if you don't get the payers to pay, you won't go very far.
Do you want to take it?
Shall I? The payers and health technology assessment are gatekeepers, but I would not call them regulators as the other regulators. They're definitely gatekeepers, and also in Europe it's going to be blended together, right? And it's also the centralized approach that will become now mandatory for our products again. From the beginning of January onwards. Those stakeholders need to evolve as the regulators did, right? And that's what I meant before. But they will, right? I mean, they will see the light when when they start working on it. So I'm not worried, but we keep the pressure, and it's part of the actions that we do ISCT and ARM to make sure that interaction moves the right way. Sorry, the other question was
Safety.
Safety. You saw the discussion about new oncological events in CAR-T, right? I think it's the right discussion again, right? There were events. Those events were reported. Those events were signaled by the FDA, and nobody was kind of making a causality, but there was a discussion, right? So that is the right way to do it. Again, we need to manage expectations, not get alarmist. That's how things should be done. And it's important for the FDA to understand the lack of causality but coincidence, and it's important for the field to understand the role of FDA to bring it out. So that is the right way to go. Not necessarily easy, not always painless, but that's how it should go. Another discussion is preclinical safety. That goes a series of other elements. But for me, the clinical safety and the harnessing of our experience, how to manage these products, is essential.
If I can add on that, because we're just in the middle of that, safety, you're right, is an issue. For instance, in Parkinson's, we will inject patients, and we hope the cells will remain for years in the patient. So how do you test for that? we came to an agreement with the authorities that there are models that are known to look at proliferative cells, and so there is a time of observation which will be somewhere between 6 and 9 months.